Yeah, we're good.
Okay, my name's Titus Murray. I'm here with Petrosys. I have my own company, FaultRisk. We make something called FaultRisk, which is a tool for probabilistic analysis of prospects. We're looking at how to take structural geology and provide it as a set of tools for the average interpreter. And this is where it fits really nice working with Petrosys. So the idea is that we take mapping information, we take stratigraphic information that might be sitting inside Petrosys. We put these into FaultRisk, and the thing we're trying to do is predict the probability of the fault sealing, and most importantly, what real water contact is, or gas water contact, and what our trap column would be. And where this really helps is it gives us a solid way of risking our prospects. So this enhanced prospect risking is the real thing that we can help people with. It also helps with reservoir modelling and history matching, because many times, especially with old fields, we're not sure which compartments have hydrocarbons and which ones don't. And so we've done a lot of work using the software to step out into undrilled fault compartments and identify an attic oil or untapped oil. The key thing when we're doing the fault seal analysis is to understand the uncertainty around the faults. And the very first thing is there a fault there in the first place? And understanding is how that fault may or may not work, and then with that, seeing what juxtaposition we've got and what sealing we've got. So, in the first place, what we're trying to do is look at our juxtaposition seal. Have we got sand on sand juxtaposition? If we have sand on sand juxtaposition, where are my leak points?
How's it going?
There's a range of uncertainties around the fault seal analysis process. The first is that in general we only have wells on the upthrown side of the structure. We don't have wells on the downthrown side. So we need to understand this stratigraphic information on the other side of the fault to predict the fault seal in here. The other problem is that we've generally got better imaging of the upthrown side of the system or way out into the hang wall. We can't see this poorly imaged zone close into the fault. And unfortunately this zone here in the poorly imaged zone is the bit that is most important in doing our fault seal calculations. This little simple Mickey Mouse cross-section I've drawn in here, you can see I've got a number of things in here. One of them is I've got erosion of the footwall. So what's happened is this footwall's popped up and I've eroded it a little bit like you might see in the Brent province in the North Sea. I've also got a normal fault in here that's been inverted, and with the inversion of the normal fault, I've got a little bit of growth in the system. So I need to see that. I need to have a way of understanding those uncertainties. So this might be 20 metres lost here and 30 metres gained here. Those things need to come into the fault seal calculation. The other uncertainty we've got in the fault seal calculation is that we can't see the sands and shales we're trying to model and trap. So what we need to do is describe those and the uncertainties around the stratigraphic representation of the fault. In terms of the fault seal mechanisms, ideally what we want is sand on shale juxtaposition. We want that primary sand on shale juxtaposition. Often people are looking for sand on sand juxtaposition, in which case we've got a much higher risk associated with this. Saying, well look, have I got a membrane seal that's going to help us in here? If we are looking at those membrane seals, then one of the commonly used methods is the shale gouge ratio. The shale gouge ratio works by taking a single point in the fault plane, and with that single point in the fault plane, you're looking at how much material can move past it and what proportion of that is sand or shale. So that's the most commonly used seal mechanism. As I said, the one you want to look for is that primary juxtaposition. Okay, so doing the fault seal calculations, we've said we've got the uncertainties, we've talked about juxtaposition and SGR. The other thing is most important is to look at the geometry. And these Allan maps, or these fault plane profiles, are the key way of working out whether the fault's going to seal or not, and where the seal points are. They're a little bit confusing, but they're relatively straightforward. What we're looking at here is the upper reservoir up here is on the other side of the screen. That's the footwall. That's downthrown down here. So what we're looking at is a cross-section across the fault, representing information from the hang wall and the footwall in that same plane, and superimposing them, seeing where the sands and shells juxtapose. Where this becomes useful is that if we just look at a single cross-section, you can see all upper and lower reservoirs juxtaposed top seal. No problem with sealing potential. But as you move along the fault, you can see my lower and upper sands juxtaposed. Finding this point of juxtaposition is a key thing to predicting the fluid content. What we could expect to see in terms of trapping oil in here is that the oil would be trapped to this point of sand on sand position in the upper reservoir. For the lower reservoir, we've got a much skinnier column. We can just see a small amount of oil trapped down here. So getting these Allan maps or fault plane profiles together is a key bit to working out what we can trap and what we can't. So the Allan maps can get more and more complicated. As you can see here, we're looking at sand on sand juxtapositions. So, looking at a prospect, the key elements of looking at a prospect is go through and catalogue the trap elements. We want to know where the crest is, we want to know where the structural spill point is, and then we want to analyse that bit of the fault that's above the spill point. So we're interested in this bit of the fault in here. We don't care about the southern stretch, just above the spill point. So cataloguing those dependencies. Now, how good is my fault? Obviously, if I've got a geologically impossible fault, I'll end up with an impossible fault seal calculation. So one of the methods, there's a number of really simple 1980s structural geology methods that we can use to understand how good our fault interpretation is. The idea of this is that if we have a single fault, it has a central maximum displacement. That maximum displacement then diminishes out to the tips. This tip line here is my zero throw line for the central maximum. So I've got this bullseye of throw profile. So if I have a fault intersecting, so if I have a horizon intersecting with a fault, the up thrown side is this single line, my down thrown side or hang wall is this dotted line in here. So we get this nice separation between the hang wall and footwall. One of the neat things you can do is then represent the hang wall footwall separation as a throw profile. We should have this upside down parabola as our displacement profile. If we've got a compound fault, so generally we've got two faults that coalesced, have joined together and they're now becoming one, then we'll start to see these compound structures. Now this can be an indication that what we've miscorrelated faults, we've made our faults too long, and so we use a combination of the throw profiles and the length throw ratios to say, well look, is this a sensible fault or not? If this thing's sitting way out here, it's too long for it. It's throw, then you start to say, well look, let's chop the fault in half, and it should sit back into the population of length versus throw. The displacement profile tool is relatively straightforward to use. You have a set of points for the foot wall, set of points for the hang wall. And what we're doing is we're grabbing the polygon out of Petrosys and splitting up into these hang wall, foot wall traces. And then we have a displacement profile down the bottom where we can go through and check our displacement profile versus theoretical profile. Okay, so how fault risk works. Having got a system in place, having got a fault model in place, and one of the things we want to do is look at these uncertainties. So in fault risk, we can describe the fault as a set of throws, length and throws, and each of those parameters is described as distribution. My fault is somewhere between 3 and 5 kilometres long, and it's most likely 4 kilometres long. My throw is somewhere between 50 and 100 metres in the throw, and it's most likely 75 metres. So we're saying, well, look, I don't know these absolutely, but I'm going to have a go at guessing them or putting a reasonable range on them to calculate our range of a range of different Allan maps. So we resolve that back against a footwall trace. With the throws and fault geometry described as uncertainties, as distributions, we can then go through and define our stratigraphy as a set of layers, with each one having a separate range of thicknesses and V-shell distributions. So then we go and multicolor the fault. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to compare it against a conventional process for looking at our fault seal, trap volumes. Commonly, if I've got a trap I'm looking at and I'm trying to risk it pre-drill, I'll sit there and say, well, look, I've got a spill point there, I'm really unlikely to fill the spill. And I'm really unlikely to have this thing with nothing in it. So if I come down, I've got a good chance of having small columns. So I've got a 90% chance of getting 10% of the volume. I've got a 50% chance of having half of the volume. And I've got a 10% chance of getting 90% of the volume. What we're doing in here is we're mixing up our uncertainty in relation to, or our risks in association with charge and fault seal and top seal. So the trick we're trying to do in fault risk is separate those out and say, well look, ignoring charge risk, what's our trapping risks? So in each realisation we do a multicolor simulation of the fault, the spill point and the crest. And we work out which is the most important aspect of the system. So, as an example, looking at our base model. Our base model is we have an oil-water contact at 1830 metre with 42 metre standard deviation. That gives us a bulk rock volume, and I've expressed them in millions of barrels just to make it easy, of 316 million barrels of bulk rock volume. Now, if shale gas ratio works, and the software always separates out the shale gas ratio and the juxtaposition cases, if shale gas ratio works, then we've got an 82% chance of this thing being filled to spill. And we've got a 17% chance of the fault controlling the fluid contact. And these are the sort of oil-water contacts I would see for those scenarios. Trap columns are very similar, so overall we're getting a 256 metre trap column. At the same time, we go through and do the juxtaposition analysis. Now, the juxtaposition analysis is going to be far more conservative. This is coming up with a 40% chance of being filled to spill. So many of these cases with the shale gas ratio, you've got a fault there, but the shale gas ratio is high enough to push the to hold the hydrocarbons down to the spill point. So with juxtaposition, we've got a 40% chance of being filled to spill and a 60% chance of being controlled by the fault. You can see that really changed that column. We go from having a 260 metre column to having a 70 metre column. So we've got 40% chance of a 260 metre column and a 60% chance of getting a 70 metre column. They're two very divergent models. Now, one of the things we can see, though, in this case is the group who are looking at this, they'd actually drilled an existing well down here, probably roughly on their P50. So they've had a go at trying to work out where the fluid, pre-drilled, said, oh, look, got a fairly good chance of having a half fill. Drill the well here. You can see this is the closing contour for our P50 for juxtaposition. So in reality, we're most likely to have this 1766 as our mean fluid contact. So there's some chance that they've got an attic in here, but it's a much smaller attic than they would ideally have liked. That's the approach that gives you a very quick look at how the software goes through the processes. What I'll do is I'll just switch over to actually using the software. It's been really straightforward to plug into Petrosys. There are a couple of places FaultRisk comes up in. The first one is in the mapping window. You can see in the mapping window, here's my prospect I'm going to have a look at. This is the Guling prospect in Malay Basin. It's been presented in a number of Exxon papers about their fault seal tools. You've got a fault here in the west and you've got a fault here in the east. These two features are things that can control the fluid contact. This one here and this one here we can see around, so they're not going to control our fluid contact. With FaultRisk, we can click on any of the fault polygons inside Petrosys and pull up the displacement profile tool. The great thing for us is that Petrosys has got an extensive range of connectors between a whole range of different software packages that allow us to get these fault polygons out of Kingdom, Petrel, OpenWorks and the like, as well as obviously the Petrosys polygons. So here you can see we've got ourselves the footwall trace and the hangwall trace of that fault polygon. The software split it into two. And what we're doing is we're seeing the system, we're trying to break the problem, the three-dimensional problem, down into two-dimensional problems. We're looking at the throw view and we're having a look at the heave view. Now you can see in this one the fault is actually already really narrow. We've got a little slider here and that gives you an idea about where the fault should be given the dip of the fault. So if I had a 20-degree dip in the fault, I should have my hang wall sitting out somewhere here. Now, faults, coolant failure criteria and geomechanics gives a reasonable idea that faults should be dipping around the 60 degrees mark. So you can see that fault is sitting, that fault polygon is actually in a pretty neat, pretty well formed. In terms of its throw profile, you can see we've got a number of bumps here. So what we can do is we can start to say, well look, is this actually a compound fault? And I go through and split this up and say, well look, this is actually most likely a number of faults. In which case what I can do is I can go through and split these. I can start to go through and have a look at these separate segments and say, well look, are they actually a number of faults that we might have miscorrelated together? Now this is particularly important when you're starting to work in New Frontiers area or move really quickly. This fault may actually be three separate segments, and this is where you want to start to go through and QC the model and say, look, is this sensible? The displacement profile tool also allows you to fix up your fault polygons, so you can grab a set of points in here. I can get the screen resolution right. And it gives us a way of going through and editing our fault polygons and fixing them up. The nice thing about this is that we can then push these fault polygons back to Petrosys and start to improve our gridding in there. So the displacement profile tool we think is a really useful tool for very quickly going through and QCing the software. As well as having the displacement profile tool inside Petrosys, we've got the actual FaultRisk application in here. It has a number of components. Another component that's coming through into Petrosys in the next versions is the fault statistics tool, and this allows us to put in families of fault polygons. We can order them by dip, we can order them by length, by maximum throw, and we can produce cross plots of length and throw, and a number of other statistical tools. So it gives you a way of going through larger numbers of faults and quickly QCing have you got a problem with your fault families. So, having got a nice set of polygons, that might be all you want to do. Put them back into Petrosys, you get a much better map, job done. If you're looking to then take your leads and work out how these leads are going to become prospects, this is where FaultRisk can really help. Each of the prospects you have a stratigraphy. Each of the layers within the stratigraphy describe distributions of thickness. In this case, I'm doing 50 and 110 metres thick and most likely 80. I've got a V-shell distribution somewhere between 15 and 35%. So this is my distribution of sand A. I have seal, sand and reservoir. The next thing we're doing, and these are basically the prognosis that you'd use in the well. The only thing we're adding in extra, generally in the prognosis of the well, we're just concerned with the sands. I also understand the seal, so there's a little bit, tiny extra bit of work we have to do to put this together, putting that seal and reservoir system together. You then define a set of leak constraints, so through and put in a spill point for the structure, and then have a set of faults. Now, what we're doing from these is we're picking the faults from the fault polygons, and this builds up our distributions of length and throw and dip automatically from the fault polygons which we've added in the displacement profile tool. So we've got two faults, an east fault and a west fault. So my fault block consists of a spill point, an east fault, a west fault, and it has a crest. If I want to, I can also go through and do a top seal analysis, and I can use fracture gradient and capillary entry pressure as methods of testing it. So what happens then is we go and fire the model off. And these models will take about 10-15 minutes to run. They're symmetric. They're embarrassingly parallel. So if you've got an SMP machine, you can use as many CPUs as you want. Most people have a 16 CPU machine with multi-threading. That means you've got 32 threads. And we see that true doubling in speed as you double the number of CPUs or using hyper-threading. You run your job. And what it's doing in each case is saying in realization 1, is it the fault? Is the west fault, the east fault, the spill point to control it? So what this gives us at the end is a set of results. Here's one I made earlier. For each of the sands, I've got an A sand and a B sand. It gives you this little report that says if juxtaposition is the key control, then I've got myself a mean 72 metre column with a standard deviation of 8 metres. If SGR is the control, then I've got an 88 metre column with a standard deviation of 23 metres. So it gives you a way of discriminating those two models. It also highlights which trap element you really need to have a look at. It means that there's a 64% chance of the east fault. It gives a fluid contact and it gives a trapped column height. So it's giving you the information you need to go straight through your reserves. The other thing is it gives you probabilistic Allan maps. The main thing we're wanting is to get this statistical output, but it gives you a P10, C50, P90 Allan map. And these Allan maps, we're not seeing a large amount of variation. They're interactive Allan maps, you can switch elements on and off. The key element is to get these reserves. If I've got a number of prospects, each of the prospects has a roll-up, so I can see how many trapped columns I've got, what my average column height is. In my prospect, and if I'm doing a real quick and dirty screening exercise, I can also put in a bulk of volume table so we can get those out of Petrosys. So then, my prospect, I've got a column height and a bulk of volume. And then at the roll-up level, I've got a number of prospects and I can see how my prospects are all ranking. We've found that FaultRisk in our consulting business is a really quick tool to very quickly get us to an understanding about which of our leads should become prospects. It's been really neat and nice to be working with the guys at Petrosys to integrate FaultRisk in there and found it very straightforward to set up within the Petrosys system. I feel that it really augments the Petrosys workflows. So thank you very much for listening.